record. Look at that. I've got the congressman right now, and very excited to meet you, sir, and really happy that you were able to join me. A lot of important issues I want to talk to you about.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's an honor to be on your podcast.
Yes, it's a huge honor. I appreciate you saying that. I think you're doing really great work since you started there. You were inaugurated, or you started in 2017 when Trump was inaugurated, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, I was elected the same night that Donald Trump was elected, and I remember the moment that my race was called, which was somewhat earlier in the evening, and people were just ecstatic and happy, and my family was there. And then all of a sudden, like as the night went on, as for many of your listeners, they started tilting their heads and looking at the maps funny. They didn't understand what they were seeing. And then by the end of the night, I left my victory party around 2 a.m. My whole crowd was still there. It's just that they moved to the bar. They were all in the bar.
Yeah, I don't know if you drink alcohol, but I don't drink too much. I drank too much that night. That's for sure. That was one of those like cliche nights to actually drink too much. It must have been for you so bittersweet. I mean, gosh, that must have been a weird evening, much less next 2 years.
It really was. And then, I mean, I think that probably gives you a sense of the roller coaster ride I was about to embark on. Those first 2 years.
It doesn't. I should have just told you. I'd love to just get some background on your history. I mean, because I do wonder about that. Like, that is my question. What was it like to be in the minority party those first 2 years with Donald Trump as president, when you were expecting during your campaign, and sure when you announced, given your entire history, things were going to be much different than that. What was it like for you for those 2 years?
Hell. It was hell. I mean, it was very, very, very long nights of voting. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was a nightmare. We were there till 1, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. routinely on all kinds of votes where, they were trying to push through just horrible policies toward Muslims, toward immigrants, toward underserved and poor people, gay people, you name it. All the targets were kind of pursued in those first 2 years.
Then you become part of the majority in 2018, probably I still think that was the most important election of our lifetime, that midterm election. What are your thoughts on the impact of that midterm election, and what changed when Democrats became the majority party in the House with Nancy Pelosi again as speaker?
Oh my gosh, Pete, it was huge, man. I mean, like, Nancy Pelosi, first of all, Nancy Pelosi is a master strategist, master tactician. She's a legislator's legislator, and she was able to effectively block the very worst excesses of Donald Trump for those remaining 2 years of his term. Of course, some damage had already been done, such as the Trump tax cut from December 2017 on his way out, in those first 2 years. But those second 2 years were really, really pivotal for setting up, obviously, the presidential election and going into the pandemic.
And then eventually doing what you're supposed to do on the Oversight Committee, because the Oversight Committee used to be apparently this committee that at least was generally more bipartisan, less political, more respected. And then years later, it became a joke. I mean, recently, I should say. And then when you guys got power back, you were able to investigate all these horrifically unethical things that happen, crazy things that you can't even make up happening in the federal government. And you knew that. If you had any friends that work in the federal government and they talk to you, they'd be like, you wouldn't even believe what the Trump administration is doing to, say, Fish and Wildlife or anywhere else they wanted to do, EPA. So once you get the power back, what changes?
My goodness. So I became the subcommittee chairman for the Oversight Subcommittee on Economic and Consumer Policy. So what that meant was I was able to do a couple things. One, investigate some of the worst corruption and fraud schemes that were going on with regard to our federal government, but also going after corporate actors who are going after our kids or going after our seniors, going after people who are vulnerable. So, for instance, I was, I launched the investigation into Juul, which really fueled the vaping epidemic. And that investigation has been cited even by the Trump administration and then the Biden administration for its new regulations on, basically flavored vaping products and other types of vaping products that are used by our young people. I also went after companies that sold baby food with heavy toxic metals, all kinds of toxins like lead and arsenic and mercury that, basically are very, very damaging to young minds and their neurodevelopment. And then I also went after Johnson and Johnson for selling talcum-based baby powder, which is really to blame for a lot of mesothelioma.
When you say
thousands of children, thousands of women, I should say.
It's so important. These conversations never happen on cable news, and people don't understand when they read the newspaper. People don't learn about what good governance is, what government's responsibility is. But you talk about the work you're doing on that subcommittee under oversight, and going after is the phrase you're using, but you're investigating and you're able to bring to light the corruption or the poison that some of these things that you just mentioned, two of which are, the pollution. That's the job of government. And that's what you're doing. You're actually doing that. And I think it's important for people to understand, but I think people don't understand that you're doing that. That's what I think.
I think that we try to kind of bring attention to some of these things. We try to break through some of the noise. But as you know, in the Trump years, there's a new level of noise, a new level of chaos, a new level of cacophony. Like it's very, very hard to get people engaged the way that they were before, because they are so fed up with kind of post-Trump politics, let's say. I think that Trump also normalized a lot of things which in previous administrations or previous times would have been disqualifying. Yeah. And yet now we see that they're not. And they're not even for the leading Republican contender for the presidential nomination.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. Specifically, I want to ask you about January 6th, and then I want to talk about some of the work that you're doing right now. And obviously with the chaos in the House, I got to ask you about—
What chaos? I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I
have to just tell you one little anecdote there. This morning, I spoke to the Freedom for Hong Kong Foundation, because it's obviously under oppressive rule by the Chinese Communist Party right now. And one of my staffers gave me a good line. He said, democracy is really messy. I voted for speaker for the 17th time today. That's how much I love democracy. And so in any case, we'll talk about that later. I'm sorry.
I just want to stay a little bit in the past here, because I do think it's important when we get the opportunity to talk to anybody, not only a congressman or woman, but anybody who was in the Capitol that day. I've become good friends with a couple of the guys, Capitol police officers, Harry Dunn, Ganell, Mike Fanone, I got to know. So I've known, and I've talked to, when I get the opportunity to talk to anybody from an intern to a congressperson, but I take it you were there that day, and I just wanted to get your read as we look at Jim Jordan, who was the lead co-conspirator of January 6th and, loved touting and still does the big lie. How do you still see that day and its prominence in our politics today, seen as that the country didn't come together and see that as what it was? The country's divided over it, and it's just crazy.
That's right. It's a day that I still don't like to watch the videos and the footage from that day, because it brings back certain feelings that I'd rather kind of not deal with.
Fear or anger?
Anger, sadness, like just to see, police officers beaten over the head with a flagpole, or to see people ransacking the Capitol. It really makes me go in a dark place, and I'd prefer not to live there. And so I try not to watch video footage. I try not to, watch the tape, so to speak. But what I learned from that day is that democracy is very precious. And really, at the end of the day, the American people entrust with their representatives the sacred and solemn duty of preserving that democracy. And once they violate that trust, in my humble opinion, at that point, they should no longer hold those trusted positions. And unfortunately, for too many of my colleagues, I think that they decided that, let's just take Kevin McCarthy, for instance. Kevin McCarthy, on the day in question, he yelled epithets at Donald Trump and basically showed some spine and, demanded a response that was, adequate to the challenge. And then the next day, he begins an apology tour with Donald Trump. I think mainly because it was just politically expedient for him to do so. And so when you have people who are willing to, have a kind of they don't have principle. It doesn't feel like they're principle-based leaders. When you don't have folks like that, it's very hard for them to govern responsibly, and B, it's hard to negotiate with them, honestly.
Yeah.
Because they can't keep their word. They don't stick to some basic stuff that's necessary for legislating as well.
Well, what do you make then of the chaos and what's happening now that they are fighting amongst each other? And by the way, let me just throw this out at you, because, if you'll ask many of the Republicans who are being interviewed, or the talking point, of course, is to blame you, the Democrats. 96% of you voted against, or, for Hakeem Jeffries, again, that you could have. So there's a lot of blame. They're blaming Democrats, which seems audacious, but I do want to give you the opportunity to respond to what they would say. I mean, you could actually throw them a couple votes and give them the speaker, and everything would go back to regular.
Well, yeah, it would go back to regular order, just a very stable status quo before Kevin McCarthy was booted. Look, that's the problem. Pete, you hit the nail on the head. But let me just point out one thing. One, it wasn't a Democrat that moved to vacate the chair or, basically remove Kevin McCarthy. It was Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz and a band of, I don't know, somebody calls them legislative terrorists. I don't know what the right word is, but a group of people who are not interested in legislating decided that they were going to move on the speaker. It wasn't Democrats. It was Republicans. That's the first thing. Secondly, even up to the time of the vote, Hakeem Jeffries was doing everything in his power to communicate with Kevin McCarthy and say, look, let's land this plane together. Let's have a bipartisan governing coalition, a unity coalition to bring stability to the House, sideline the extremists, and make sure that we can avert a government shutdown, assist Ukraine, assist Israel, assist our partners, take care of business. And he rebuffed Hakeem Jeffries. That's the part of this story that does not get told very much. Kevin McCarthy actively rebuffed Hakeem Jeffries, and I learned later on that within their caucus, it's thought to be traitorous to work with Democrats. And so when you have that as a governing principle within the other caucus, it's very hard to work with them right now.
Well, whether they consider it traitorous or not, the truth is when they do work with you, the right-wing media controls them. I mean, I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. I would love to talk with you more about that at some point, but they're like, I just don't think there's anybody in progressive media that could savage Congressman Krishnamoorthi every day that would like really make you change the way that you're voting. There's certainly not for the most part. That doesn't work on the left with Democrats and with progressive. You're not worried so much about how progressive media is going to demand, in this case, how you vote. I mean, Hannity was lobbying them, and I just feel like the Republicans who might have any decency and morality left in them know that they have to answer to some right-wing crazy person who only has to answer to ratings and dividing us.
That's right.
I
think that there is a certain, I don't know. I obviously I'm prejudiced. I'm biased. I get it. I'm a Democrat, but really, Pete, within our caucus, and I really mean this. I'm starting to sound like Joe Biden. I mean this sincerely, Pete. I really mean this. But when we get together, whether you're the most progressive member of the caucus or the most conservative member of the Democratic caucus, when we get together, the guiding principle is what Hakeem Jeffries always says, which is what is in the best interest of the American people.
Yeah.
What should we do right this moment? Okay. And that is the guiding principle. And I respectfully submit, again, I'm biased. I get it. Some people will say I'm a homer for our side, but even within progressive media, so to speak, I think that some of our best ideals guide us, are motivating us. It's not about, how do we, kick down the little guy? How do we help a big corporate interest or special interest at the expense of, an average person? I think those types of principles inform our media landscape and also inform our dialogue within the caucus and how we move forward.
You are.
By the way, that's what I think. Sorry, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
She drilled that into each of us. I have to say I consider myself kind of a student of Pelosi politics in the caucus. I came in under her leadership, and that was something she drilled into all freshmen and other members of the caucus.
I mean, say whatever you want about her. She got more done than any other speaker in our lifetime. Whether you liked what she got done or didn't, she got it done for her party. And I think that's really important. All right. Well, I know I got to let you go, but we didn't talk about, I do have to ask you, you are still working. Like, I think that's important. By the way, I hate it when they say like, they sent us on vacation. I mean, I hear Democrats say this too. They sent us on vacation for 6 weeks. It's like, you're never on vacation. You go back to your district and you work. Like, you don't really take vacations. You have different offices and you work at those offices, right? Isn't that the deal? Because you're actually doing work. You are the ranking member of the House Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, apparently, and you issued a statement on the Belt and Road Initiative Summit that's taking place in Beijing. Like, you're working, you're doing this, you're paying attention to this, you issued this statement, and I want to know why we should care about this initiative. Why are you concerned, a congressman from Illinois, about this Belt and Road Initiative and this alliance between Russia and China?
Look, I think that it's funny, they're having a summit in Beijing, and let me just tell you some of the people that are coming: Vladimir Putin, Viktor Orban, members of the Taliban, Xi Jinping. It sounds like the scene out of Dark Knight where the Joker meets the mob to kill the Batman.
I just watched that. Yes.
I love that movie, by the way. I love that whole trilogy.
Christopher Nolan, amazing, but it's too close to real.
It's too close to. This is a group of people who want to undermine the international rules-based order. If I had to say it in more, if I had to kind of rephrase that, these are people who do not believe in democracy. They do not believe in human rights. They do not believe in sovereignty. They are okay. Vladimir Putin is, engaged in a criminal war, an absolutely criminal war in Ukraine. China basically looks the other way, and so do this rogues gallery of leaders, so to speak, leaders, I put in air quotes, who gather to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. But let me just talk about that for 1 second.
One thing you didn't mention is those leaders, maybe not Hungary, but they also believe in annexation of other land.
Correct.
Russia and China both have, certainly Russia has annexed a whole bunch of land in the last three American presidents. I think of things in covering politics from Obama to Bush, Georgia, Chechnya. I mean, they annexed
Crimea.
So
Crimea.
In Crimea, and then China, obviously, we can talk about. So I just want to throw annexation into the Hall of Villains aspirations.
It's part of their aspirations. It's a scary thing because in the post-World War II kind of order, so to speak, we all agreed. I mean, most nations agreed, if we're going to have differences with regard to, let's say, land, as you had mentioned, let's resolve them at the bargaining table. Let's negotiate them peacefully. Any other alternative could plunge us not into just a regional war, but much worse. And that's what we're seeing, for instance, with China and Taiwan. But let me just say, for the average person, why does this matter? Because I think that at the end of the day, there is a competing system of principles for governing people that is trying to outdo us, that is trying to gain influence throughout the world. And that set of governing principles does not respect human rights, does not respect freedom of speech or freedom of any kind. By the way, this morning, let me just say, I met with the International Coalition for Tibet, and they came to my office.
You got Richard Gere was in your office, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I think we were all starstruck. And Richard Gere and the president of the Tibetan people came to my office and met with me and Mike Gallagher, the chair of the Select Committee, and I'm the ranking member. And what they described was unspeakable. The way that their whole culture is being erased by the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, unfortunately, is something that we should all be concerned about because it can go beyond their borders. They're doing it to the Uyghur people, where there's a genocide happening in the Xinjiang region, which is the northwest province of China. It's happening with regard to the Tibetans, happening with regard to dissidents, Hong Kongers, you name it. And so we don't want that to happen. But obviously, we have to do things at home to fix our governance. We can't have a House of Representatives without a speaker. We have to have a Congress that functions. We can't have government shutdowns. We should try to invest in people so that they can upgrade their skills and compete in technologies of the future. We have to fix our legal immigration system so we can attract and retain the best and brightest from around the world. So we have work to do. But at the same time, we can work with Republicans and others to protect our interests and our values. And that's why this committee matters.
Well, I'll just say this last thing and let you go. You mentioned your work on the Oversight Committee, and I know that you, at an Oversight Committee hearing, had some sharp questions into Purdue Pharma's role in the opioid epidemic. And I know that you did a really great job questioning those pharma giants and the family, the Sackler family. And I think that that's really important work that you're doing. And that's been an epidemic that obviously, as much as anybody, has ravaged this country. And it's important that there's justice for families and that kind of thing doesn't happen. And so I want to thank you on behalf of anybody who's lost someone through the opioid epidemic or had someone suffer. I thought that was really important amongst some of the other work. And I made a note that when I was prepping to talk to you, that I would mention that on the record. I think that's very important work.
Pete, thank you so much. And that was an object lesson when you put kind of profits over people.
Yeah.
The Sackler family knew what was happening. Purdue Pharma knew what was going on with millions of people getting addicted and then thousands and thousands of people dying. And I think I closed my questioning of one of the Sacklers by saying, Mr. Sackler, your product OxyContin ended up addicting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And that's really bad. But sir, I submit to you that you are addicted to money. And I close with that. And I think
I'll try to find that and play it. for people to hear. I read yesterday, by the way, Congressman, that Rite Aid just filed for bankruptcy because something to do with their culpability.
I think Rite Aid, so a number of companies, including Rite Aid and others, looked the other way as they were dispensing a lot of this medication.
Yeah.
They knew it was wrong to dispense the way that they were doing.
That alarm goes off, it means you're done. Thank you so much for talking to me, Congressman. Really appreciate it, and I hope we can do it again. And when next time I'm down there, I'd love to meet up.
I would love that, Pete. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely.